Decoding the avoidant-empath paradox. Why opposites attract and repel. The avoidant-empath dynamic is one of the most powerful, magnetic, and painfully confusing bonds in modern relationships. It begins like a spark that neither person planned for. The empath, with their warm presence, emotional depth, and natural intuition, feels like a breath of fresh air to the avoidant, who has spent years guarding their heart behind invisible walls. And the avoidant, with their calmness, independence, and mystery, feels like a soothing island to the empath, who longs to be understood without having to explain every piece of themselves. In the beginning, it feels almost spiritual. The avoidant feels safe for the first time, and the empath feels seen. But what neither person realizes is that the same traits that create the attraction are the exact traits that will later create the tension. The empath grows closer, wanting connection, reassurance, and emotional presence. To the empath, closeness is love. It feels natural. It feels healthy. But to the avoidant, closeness is pressure, responsibility, and the fear of losing themselves. What the empath calls intimacy, the avoidant's nervous system labels as danger. And so the retreat begins, slowly, subtly, almost invisibly at first. The avoidant doesn't say, "I'm scared." They say things like, "I just need space. I'm overwhelmed right now," or "let's slow down." But what the empath hears is rejection. What the avoidant feels is survival. It's not personal, it's protection. And this is where the paradox starts to activate. You see, avoidants crave what the empath gives, but only from a safe distance. They want affection, but not emotional demand. They want love, but not vulnerability. They want company, but not closeness. And the empath, who naturally loves without holding back, starts feeling unappreciated, invisible, or emotionally starved. This imbalance wakes up the empath's insecurity. They start overgiving, trying harder, explaining more, loving more fiercely, believing that if they just show their loyalty, the avoidant will finally relax into the relationship. But that only triggers the avoidant's fear even more. The empath steps forward, the avoidant steps back. The empath tries to fix it, the avoidant shuts down, and suddenly the relationship becomes a dance where one person feels abandoned and the other feels suffocated, even though neither person wants to hurt the other. What makes this paradox brutal is that both partners misinterpret each other's intentions. The empath interprets distance as, "they don't love me." The avoidant interprets closeness as, "I'm going to lose myself." Both projections are wrong, but both feel true. And in relationships, feelings become facts, even when they aren't. So the empath begins to question their worth, and the avoidant begins to question their autonomy. The empath spirals emotionally, the avoidant escapes emotionally. And while one cries silently, the other disconnects silently. But deep down, both are hurting for the same reason. They want closeness. They just fear it in opposite ways. But here's the twist most people don't understand. Avoidants are not unemotional. They're emotionally overwhelmed. They don't fear intimacy because they don't care. They fear it because caring too much once caused them pain. Avoidants pull away, not because the empath means nothing, but because the empath means too much. The more the empath reaches out, the more afraid the avoidant becomes of depending on someone and then losing them. Meanwhile, the empath doesn't fear closeness. They fear disconnection. They fear emotional abandonment. So the avoidant is afraid of emotional drowning, and the empath is afraid of emotional starvation. Each is trying to survive in their own way, but their survival strategies collide and create chaos. You see this pattern clearly during conflict. When the empath is hurt, they want to talk now, to clear the air, to reconnect, to restore harmony. It feels natural. It feels urgent. But the avoidant hears intensity, pressure, and emotional heat. Their instinct is to withdraw, shut down, or disappear temporarily to regulate their emotions. And when the empath sees this withdrawal, their panic heightens. They begin to chase. They demand answers. They seek reassurance. And the avoidant, feeling cornered, escapes even more. The more one chases, the more the other runs. The more one runs, the more the other chases. And this pursuit-withdrawal cycle becomes the silent killer of avoidant-empath relationships. But if the paradox is so painful, then why do these two keep finding each other? Why does an empath's heart feel drawn to avoidance almost instinctively? The answer lies in psychological imprinting. Many empaths grew up in environments where they had to read emotions, fix tension, or carry the emotional weight of others. Their nervous system is trained to attach to people who are emotionally unavailable because it feels familiar. And avoidants are often drawn to empaths because they feel emotionally safe. Someone who will never aggressively invade their boundaries or demand more than they can give at once. Each person holds a piece of the other's childhood wounds. It's familiarity disguised as chemistry. But here's the hopeful truth. The avoidant empath paradox is not doomed. The problem is not the attraction, it's the unconsciousness. When both partners understand the cycle, everything begins to change. The empath learns that pulling back does not mean the love is gone, it means the avoidant is overwhelmed. And the avoidant learns that the empath is not trying to control them, they're trying to connect. When awareness enters the relationship, the dynamic stops being a battlefield and becomes a bridge. The empath learns to self-regulate instead of overgive. The avoidant learns to communicate instead of disappear. And the emotional space between them turns from a threat into a shared responsibility. Here's the secret that breaks the entire paradox. Avoidants don't need less love, they need slower love. And empaths don't need constant attention, they need consistent truth. When the empath stops rushing connection, the avoidant feels safe to step forward. When the avoidant stops avoiding communication, the empath feels grounded and secure. The relationship becomes a rhythm instead of a tug-of-war. It becomes two people learning timing, pacing, and mutual understanding instead of two nervous systems fighting for survival. The real transformation happens when the empath stops trying to rescue the avoidant and the avoidant stops trying to outrun the empath. Only then can both show up as partners instead of protectors of their old wounds. Opposites don't attract because they're incomplete. They attract because they mirror the parts of each other that need healing. The empath teaches the avoidant softness without losing identity. The avoidant teaches the empath boundaries without losing heart. And somewhere in the middle of these two lessons is a love that feels mature, stable, and deeply alive. So if you're in an avoidant empath dynamic right now, here's your reminder. You're not broken, and neither is the person you love. You're simply caught in a dance you were never taught how to lead. But with awareness, patience, and emotional honesty, this paradox becomes a pathway, not a prison. It becomes a relationship where closeness doesn't feel dangerous and independence doesn't feel like abandonment. Because when an avoidant learns safety and an empath learns boundaries, the relationship stops being a cycle and becomes a connection, one that lasts, one that grows, and one that finally feels like home.